The room laughed when he dropped his coffee. Not a kind laugh, not accidental, the kind that lingers a second too long, sharp enough to cut. The ceramic cup shattered against the marble floor, dark liquid spreading like a stain no money could erase. 25 years old, son of one of the richest men in the country, and in that moment he was just a target. "You good there, golden boy?" someone said, loud enough for the entire atrium to hear. The Tech Campus Cafe buzzed with energy, founders, grad students, investors in tailored jackets, but the sound narrowed into a tunnel. 3 men blocked his path, close enough that he could smell their cologne. Expensive, overused, confidence without restraint. He bent to pick up the cup, hands steadying himself more than the mess. He'd learned early that reacting only made it worse. Wealth didn't stop humiliation. Sometimes it invited it. "Careful," another added, nudging him with a shoulder. "Wouldn't want Daddy's stock to dip because you tripped." Laughter followed. Phones angled subtly. Not obvious yet. Waiting. He straightened slowly, jaw tight, eyes down. He'd been in boardrooms with men twice their age, but here, surrounded by peers who smelled weakness, he felt small. Every instinct told him to leave. Pride told him not to. That's when the air changed. No announcement, no raised voice, just a shift, like someone had lowered the volume on the room. Conversations faltered, a few heads turned, then more. A man stood near the entrance, mid-40s, black, broad shoulders beneath a plain jacket. Not flashy, not loud, but stillness clung to him in a way that demanded attention. His eyes weren't curious, they were assessing. He had seen this before. The men didn't notice him yet. They were still enjoying the moment. "Relax," one said, holding up his hands mockingly. "We're just joking." The billionaire's son didn't answer. He swallowed, breathing shallow, aware of how exposed he looked. He hated that feeling, not fear, but powerlessness. The man took a step forward, then another, each step measured, controlled. "Hey," the tallest bully snapped suddenly, "you got a problem?" The man stopped a few feet away, close enough to intervene, far enough not to escalate. His voice, when it came, was calm, almost quiet. "You're done." Not a threat, a statement. The laughter faltered. "And who are you supposed to be?" the bully scoffed, though his tone wavered. The man didn't answer. He didn't need to. His gaze never left the group. He wasn't looking at fists or faces. He was watching balance, posture, intent. The billionaire's son glanced sideways, confused. Something about the man's presence steadied him. Not protection yet, possibility. One of the men stepped closer anyway, chest puffed, pride wounded. He bumped the young man's shoulder deliberately. "Stay where you are," the man said softly. The words weren't loud, but they carried. Silence spread. Phones rose now, not hiding anymore. The bully smirked. Or what? The man shifted his weight, just slightly. And for the first time, the billionaire's son understood something terrifying and strange at once. Whatever happened next wouldn't be chaos, it would be controlled. Security was nowhere in sight. The crowd leaned in. The bully lifted his hand, and the man finally moved. Cut to black. Before we go further, let me know where you're watching from. Your city and state, comment below. Hit subscribe to see what happens next. The man's eyes never left the bully's. Every subtle movement he made radiated control, like the room itself responded to his calm. The tallest of the 3 stepped closer again, arrogance barely hiding the flicker of doubt that now tickled at the edge of his mind. "You really gonna stand there, old man, or you just gonna watch?" he jeered. The man's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in quiet calculation. He didn't flinch, he didn't raise his voice. He simply shifted his stance, a barely noticeable adjustment of his weight, the kind of movement that spoke volumes without saying a word. The 25-year-old son felt a strange sense of reassurance. Standing so close to this man, he felt the first hint of possibility, not just survival, but safety. He straightened his back, testing his own posture, trying to mirror the stillness radiating from the man beside him. The bullies laughed, a little too high, a little too sharp. They thought the pause meant hesitation, weakness. The man's hand moved subtly toward the younger man's shoulder, a touch, light but grounding. "Stay calm. Watch," he said, low, steady, almost a whisper. The leader of the trio scoffed again, leaning in as if proximity could intimidate. But as he shifted forward, something unexpected happened. The man's body moved with him, not to strike, not to block, but to redirect. The bully's momentum carried him past the 25-year-old without landing a single blow. He stumbled. Surprise flashed across his face. The cafe held its breath. No one clapped. No one laughed. Phones were trained, zooming in, capturing every detail. What?" one muttered under his breath. The man's eyes didn't sparkle with triumph. There was no satisfaction, just precision, just control. The 25-year-old swallowed hard, realizing for the first time that protection didn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it meant being steady, being unshakable, being a wall that chaos simply could not penetrate. Another bully stepped in, taller, heavier, more reckless. He swung his arm, trying to shove the billionaire's son aside, maybe even provoke the man into a misstep. But the older man's movements were deliberate, fluid. One guiding touch of the arm, a subtle shift of balance, and the attack fizzled harmlessly. The bully stumbled sideways, arms flailing, landing on a chair that tipped over with a loud crash. The cafe gasped, students murmuring, phones clicked. Someone whispered, "Is he trained?" The 25-year-old's chest rose and fell faster now, but not in panic. He was learning, watching, understanding. Wealth had taught him negotiation, influence, and how to bend the world with money, but this was something else. Discipline, focus, calm under pressure, and suddenly he wanted to learn it. The tallest bully now froze mid-step. His smirk faltered. He glanced at his companions. Doubt flickered across all their faces. They expected fear. They expected hesitation. Instead, they faced someone who didn't react in rage, didn't escalate, didn't even seem human in his steadiness. The man placed a hand lightly on the young man's back, guiding him toward an empty corner of the cafe. "Breathe. Stand straight. Don't let them see your fear," he murmured. The 25-year-old did as he was told. Each inhale became slightly easier, each step slightly surer. The bullies hesitated. Even the leader's bravado wavered. And then the final bully, smaller, wiry, desperate, lunged again, hands flailing. The man didn't hit. He didn't block aggressively. He shifted, caught the attacker's wrist with a single hand, guiding him past the young billionaire. The man's other hand brushed the boy's shoulder again, anchoring him. The cafe erupted, not in laughter, but in shocked whispers. Phones zoomed closer. Comments spread among students. Who is he? Martial arts? Security? The 25-year-old's pulse steadied. He had stood tall. For the first time, he felt the faintest spark of control. But the bullies weren't finished. Their momentum built again, and the man knew this was only the beginning.
The cafe air had changed. The chatter, the casual laughter, even the faint hiss of the espresso machine, everything faded to the background, replaced by a single taut thread of tension. Every eye in the room had shifted to the three men surrounding the young billionaire. They were still standing, still trying to mask the growing uncertainty gnawing at their bravado. The tallest one squared his shoulders, taking another step forward. "All right," he said, voice forced, a mixture of irritation and disbelief. "This isn't funny anymore. Step aside or we'll—" His threat dissolved the instant the older man moved. Not fast, not aggressively, just enough. The man stepped slightly to the side, and in that subtle motion, the tallest bully's momentum carried him past, off balance, and into the corner table. A chair clattered to the floor, cups rattled, a laptop slid, barely missing the edge. The cafe collectively exhaled. Phones raised, fingers hovering over record buttons, unsure whether they were witnessing a lesson or a miracle. The 25-year-old swallowed hard. His pulse was steadying, but his eyes were wide. He had never seen control like this, not in boardrooms, not in his father's office, not anywhere money could shield him. This wasn't muscle or anger. This was discipline. "You see?" the man murmured, almost casually, placing a firm hand on the young man's shoulder. "They rely on fear, on momentum, on chaos. You don't have to respond with the same." The middle bully, stocky, aggressive, took a swing, reckless and clumsy. The man didn't flinch. Instead, he pivoted, guiding the motion harmlessly aside with a gentle redirection. The attacker stumbled, arms flailing, landing unceremoniously on the floor. No harm done, no triumph expressed, only precision, only control. The 25-year-old's chest rose and fell more evenly now. He mimicked the stance, his own weight centered, eyes calm, shoulders squared. It felt strange to find confidence in stillness, but somehow he did. The final bully, smaller but wiry, lunged with a desperate cry. The older man stepped into the path, lightly catching his wrist, pivoting him past like a teacher guiding a student through a drill. The young man watched, mesmerized. No one had ever moved like this, not even in combat simulations or high-end self-defense classes his father had paid for. The cafe erupted in whispers. "He's trained. Martial arts? Or some kind of security?" The 25-year-old realized for the first time that this man wasn't just protecting him physically, he was teaching him something far more valuable. Strength didn't come from fists, it didn't come from money, it came from self-control, awareness, and timing. The leader of the bullies now hesitated, his arrogance cracked. He looked at his companions, their faces equally uncertain. They had expected fear, hesitation, panic. What they hadn't expected was the calm, deliberate wall in front of them and the quiet confidence radiating from the young billionaire who no longer flinched at every shove. The older man placed another hand lightly on his shoulder. "Remember this. Stand tall. They push because they think you'll crumble. You don't. Not today. Not ever." The 25-year-old nodded, his voice steady when he finally spoke. I understand." The bullies exchanged glances. For a moment, the room was frozen. Then the leader muttered under his breath, frustration thick in his tone. "This isn't over." The man tilted his head slightly, a subtle, almost imperceptible signal. Calm, ready, not cocky, not aggressive, just controlled. The threat hadn't disappeared, but it had been contained. The young billionaire realized something crucial. This was no ordinary protection. This was training in the most valuable form of power, the kind that didn't rely on money, status, or strength, but on awareness, discipline, and timing. Phones were still recording. Students whispered. The cafe had become a theater, but the lesson wasn't for them. It was for him, for the boy who had grown up thinking wealth could solve everything. Today, he was learning something money could never buy. And as the bullies hesitated again, regrouping, the older man's eyes met his. No words were needed. Stay calm, stand tall, control the moment. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time, the 25-year-old billionaire understood he might not just survive it, he might stand through it.
The tension had stretched taut, like a bowstring ready to snap. Every movement in the cafe carried weight. Every breath seemed amplified. The three bullies had regrouped, their faces a mixture of frustration and disbelief. Their initial confidence had cracked, and now uncertainty ruled. The tallest one leaned forward, attempting intimidation. "All right, enough games. Move, or we'll—" He never finished. The 45-year-old stepped forward, not fast, not aggressive, but with deliberate weight and timing. He guided the first bully's forward momentum to the side, using nothing but balance and a subtle push, sending the man stumbling harmlessly into a chair. Cups rattled. A laptop slid closer to the edge of a table, but it didn't tip. The cafe held its breath. Phones zoomed, capturing every precise movement. The second bully, stocky and reckless, lunged next. The older man's hands barely moved, but they redirected the swing. The attack fizzled as the bully lost his balance and fell onto the floor with a dull thud. Not hurt, just controlled. The point was clear. Chaos could not succeed against calm. The 25-year-old's chest rose and fell steadily now. No longer frozen, he mirrored the man's stance subtly, shifting his weight, grounding himself. For the first time, he felt the raw power of presence, of self-control. This wasn't about fists or threats. This was about commanding the room without a single loud word. The smallest bully, wiry and desperate, threw himself forward in a final reckless attempt. The man didn't strike. He didn't even raise his voice. With a smooth, fluid motion, he intercepted the attacker's wrist, redirecting him past the young billionaire. The boy instinctively stepped aside, guided by the man's subtle cues. He felt a surge of confidence. "You see?" the man said quietly, voice like a calm river cutting through stone. "Strength isn't about punching harder. It's about knowing you don't have to. Control the moment, and the moment won't control you." The young man's eyes met the bully's. They had expected fear. They had expected panic. Instead, they faced calm, discipline, and the quiet assertion of authority. Their confidence crumbled under a weight it couldn't measure. The tallest bully muttered, barely audible, "This isn't over." The man tilted his head slightly, a subtle signal, ready, composed, unshakable. He didn't raise a hand or threaten. He simply stood in place, a wall of presence, and for the first time, the young billionaire realized he could stand with him. He straightened, shoulders back, and spoke, not loud, not arrogant, but firm. "You're done here. Walk away." The cafe went silent. Phones captured it all. Students whispered. The bullies froze, their postures faltering. Something about the calm in the words and the certainty in the voice made retreat the only reasonable choice. One by one, they backed away, mumbling excuses, until they were gone. The tension didn't vanish entirely. It lingered, like a storm cloud refusing to dissipate, but the immediate threat had passed. The 25-year-old exhaled slowly. For the first time that day, he felt the faint thrill of control, not just over the situation, but over himself. Wealth had taught him influence, education had taught him strategy, but today he had learned something deeper. Discipline and composure could turn the tide more effectively than any amount of money or brute force. The man's hand rested lightly on his shoulder. "Remember this feeling," he said. "Not the fear, not the anger. They're fleeting. This is lasting. Stand tall no matter what comes next." The young man nodded. Words failed him, but he didn't need them. The lesson was etched into his posture, his breathing, his presence. The cafe slowly returned to life. Conversations whispered back into existence. The murmur of cups, the low hum of machines, the shuffle of students. Yet something fundamental had changed. Eyes lingered on him, on the man beside him, on the unspoken demonstration of mastery. And in that subtle shift, the 25-year-old billionaire knew he had gained more than safety. He had gained clarity, control, and the first real understanding of what it meant to stand tall, against anyone, against any chaos, against the weight of expectation itself. The storm had passed for now, but both knew it wasn't over. It never was. The cafe had quieted, though the hum of conversation never fully returned. Students whispered in small groups, phones still raised, capturing fragments of what had just unfolded. What had started as intimidation ended as a lesson. Calm could outshine chaos. Discipline could outlast arrogance. The 25-year-old billionaire exhaled slowly, finally letting himself feel the weight lift. Today, he had learned something money had never bought him: clarity, control, and presence. Standing there, shoulders square, chest steady, he realized that true strength wasn't in status or wealth. It was in how you carried yourself when everything tried to push you down. The 45-year-old man, quiet and composed, placed a hand on his shoulder. You stood. You didn't panic. You didn't let them see fear. That's the first step. The young man nodded. I understand now. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me, the man said, his voice calm but firm. You've already done the work. Remember this. Stand tall, no matter what comes next. Outside, the bullies slunk away, humiliated, not by fists, not by status, but by discipline and calm authority. Phones captured the moment, spreading the story across campus and social media. Discipline over arrogance. Billionaire kid finally stood up without anyone striking him. Who is that man? The story became legend overnight, shared not for the fight, but for the lesson it taught. The young billionaire realized that courage wasn't loud, and power didn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stood, unshaken, steady, and deliberate. Today, he had witnessed that firsthand. He turned to the man again. I want to learn this, not for show, not for others, but for myself, so I can stand like this, no matter what. A faint smile appeared. Then we start there. Discipline first. Everything else comes after. Remember, it's not about fighting. It's about presence, awareness, and control. Later, walking across campus, he felt different, stronger, not because someone had defended him, but because he had learned how to stand, to control the room without raising a hand, to rise above fear and arrogance. And in that moment, he understood a truth more valuable than money, more enduring than power. Control, calm, and courage are lessons no wealth can buy. The cafe had witnessed more than just an incident. It had witnessed a transformation. And the young billionaire, guided by the man who had taught him to stand, carried that lesson beyond the walls, ready to face any storm that life might throw. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Share it for everyone who's ever felt powerless, for every parent who prayed their child would find courage, and for anyone who's been underestimated. Subscribe for more stories where discipline beats arrogance, where the underestimated rise, and where calm moves can shake the loudest room. Remember, courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it simply stands tall. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story that reminds you power isn't just about strength, it's about presence. And sometimes the calmest person in the room is the one who changes everything.